Welcome back to the Metro. On 1019 WDET-FM, I'm Tia Graham. Now, mothers do so much for us. They give us life. They often care and nurture us. They keep us in line when necessary, and they expose us to different people and places. And all of that to say, it's a lot of labor. Parenting right now in general is really hard. There's no one definitive playbook for how to best love and guide your kids, and there are often fewer neighborly and communal spaces to turn for help. But none of our team on the Metro is a mom. I'm not a mom, but we have great moms. And as Mother's Day is coming up, we want to know, what's a day in the life of a mom? What are the challenges and struggles, the joys and delights? We're going to get into all that with two mothers from two different perspectives and places in our region. And we also want to hear from you. What's one thing you wish someone had told you before you became a mom, but no one told you? The number is 313-577-1019. One more time, 313-577-1019. And our guest is Ambra Redrick. She runs the nonprofit Teen Hype in Detroit and has two biological daughters, and her husband has two children that she helps raise as well. Ambra, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. So, what does Mother's Day mean to you?
I think, if I can be honest, I am not good at celebrating myself.
Yeah.
But I'm really good at centering everyone else's well-being. So I think it is a time for mothers just to pause and maybe pat themselves on the back, give them an opportunity to, relax and to say to themselves, job well done.
Honestly, yes. Just, one thing I will say is hearing moms say that. I hear that from a lot of moms. Like, I just don't take time for myself. I don't take time to just care for myself. I care for everyone else. But, it's hard for me to accept that. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I hear that from moms so much.
I mean, it's an interesting day because it's Mother's Day, but you're still mothering. Like,
it's not turn off.
Yeah, there's no way to really turn that off. And so I think that when you are a mother, you're always thinking about your children, the children that may be your biological children, the children that you hold in your heart. And so it's a job. It's just an ongoing job. And I don't know that there is a way to actually turn it off. You can cut it down maybe, but I don't know that you can turn it off.
That is just such a daunting thing to honestly, I don't have kids once again, but, just to think, I hear that too. Like you're always a mom.
You are.
Always, 24/7. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about growing up in the city of Detroit. Your grandmother was really important in your life. Tell us a little bit about who she was and how she influenced you.
I was raised by Black June Cleaver, and she was a woman that was very traditional. I was At the time, I had no respect for getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning and having my bed made and getting dressed and going absolutely nowhere. But I understood that was the expectation. She was a person that believed in excellence, that believed that children were meant to be seen and not heard. Very much. She was a fierce protector. If I had a barrette missing, yeah. She would go on the block and still keep her lipstick very, very tight. She also was a person that that had a really good moral compass and tried to give me a lot of character and lead me the right way.
And it paid off.
Yeah.
It paid off. You have an organization now, 21 years of supporting young people in the city of Detroit. And if your grandma could see you right now, what would that conversation look like?
Well, my grandma, again, traditional. So, even when she was in her 90s and I was taking care of her, she would say to me all the time, you can go back to school and be a teacher or a nurse. So she probably would say the same thing.
I love that. No, I love that. She's just like, we're going to make sure that you got some type of stability underneath you. So a paycheck every week. I love that. Was your grandma Southern?
She wasn't, really. No, not really. She came from North Carolina, but she didn't move in a way that would remind you of really Southern roots. And also, my grandmother adopted my mother, so she was my adoptive grandmother.
Wow. So like you said, even more of a June Cleaver, the Black June Cleaver there.
Yes.
So what was it like growing up in Detroit during a time when neighbors really did watch over the block and watch over the community, when you had the aunts and uncles and sitting on the porch just watching?
Oh, it was the most beautiful village ever. Like, as a child, you don't think about it. You don't know how it happens. It just kind of exists. But if you can imagine living on a block and all the resources are right there. If someone passes away, somehow magically people come on your porch and they deliver food and they take care of you. If young people are outside, they are watched by the whole community. I can remember when my grandfather was ill, there was another father that came and cut the grass. I can remember running up and down the street, and whatever that boundary was, you can go 4 houses down. If I hit that 5th house, somehow the phone would ring, and she would say, somebody would call my grandmother and say, Lily, that baby is too far down. And next thing I know, someone's hollering out the window.
I mean, honestly, in this, like, I had that little sliver as you're speaking, and it's bringing thoughts and memories back, because, I remember I couldn't go past a certain amount of houses, and I couldn't go back past like a boulder or something like that. And if I did, Miss Willis would call my mom. Like, I remember that little portion of life before it really did start to change. I would say for me, I saw the change around the recession, when the houses were being lost and the neighborhoods were being lost. That's when I really saw it disappear. But just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced when you were growing up with your grandma, and some of the challenges you may have faced with your mom as well.
Well, my grandmother only had a 3rd grade education, so education wasn't something that we really talked about. I cannot tell you how people are going to pass out. Don't crash your cars when I say this. I didn't know really anything about a Cass Tech or Renaissance. Like, that just wasn't a conversation. You went to your neighborhood school, and she just sent me along, and the expectation was that I would do well wherever I was at. Mm-hmm. My mother lived a life in recovery, and still has been in recovery for about 30 years. And so that's kind of what got me down the path of being raised by my grandmother. And I imagine that it was difficult. Oftentimes people say to me, like, oh, it must have felt like you were being raised by 2 mothers. And I was like, no, felt like I was being raised by a mother and a grandmother, but in 2 very different ways. Like, I would be with my grandmother sometimes, and that's my June Cleaver life. Yeah. And then I would go to my mom's house where we were playing spades.
It's just 2 different worlds you were walking in.
Very different worlds.
And when you think about those 2 different worlds, because honestly, Detroit can be summed up in many different worlds. And that's 2 of the worlds that I think a lot of folks who grew up in the city often balance with, is either you have the younger mom who has the friends over and you're having that situation, or you have your grandma who's like, okay, you need to wake up and go to sleep at this time. If it's on the table, you're eating it. If you don't want it, you're not eating that night. So talk about those.
I think what's really sad is that a lot of it has gone away, right?
Yeah.
Like, COVID took a lot of children's anchors.
I know.
And so that village that we have counted on for so long over the years has kind of dissipated. And it's really, really almost heartbreaking, because that was, if you had a child and that child was getting on your nerves, the answer was grandmama. And, grandma was the one that might pick up your baby. Grandma was the ally. Grandma was the one that, bought your child something they had no business having. In many ways, that was the support and your anchor. And for a lot of young people, I think they're missing that now.
Yeah. And, this thinking about growing up once again, and you interacting with your mom and interacting with your grandmother, you talked about your mom being in recovery. And, that's something that a lot of folks aren't necessarily comfortable with talking about, but it's an important aspect to talk about. So can you just talk a little bit about what it was like growing up, and especially as you're coming into yourself, what it was like growing up?
Sure. So my mother is a very, very strong and brave woman. And so when I was very, very young, she went into recovery, and I just it's funny because as a child, you don't really know what's normal. You just kind of go along with whatever's happening. And so I spent many days following along behind her and going to work with her. I can remember, like, my mother was a substance abuse counselor. I can't even, Harbor Light, maybe, like many, long time ago. And I would sit under her desk as she was talking to clients.
Wow.
And it was my first interaction with learning how people support other people in their journey. And it's funny, in many ways, my career mirrored hers for a very, very long time.
Yeah, because you learned right as you were going along with her. But I do want to talk about your personal experience as a mom. When did you become a mom?
I became a mother 6 days before my 18th birthday. I know this very well.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And of course, I had no idea what I was doing. And in many ways, we grew up together. And in some ways, I feel like she raised me. Yeah. And just because God wanted it to be really, really interesting, I took her to college. And right over Labor Day weekend, I announced that I was pregnant. And I started all over.
Really?
So my children are 19 years apart.
Okay, first and foremost, you're speaking to a person who is 15 years apart from her sibling, oldest sibling. So I get it.
Yes.
I really get it. And it's, for me personally, it's been a very fun ride to have an older sibling. It's been great for me. I don't know if you can speak for the same experience for yourself.
So it's just funny. I have lived playpen and pack and play is often what I say. And life has changed. You know, my first child I raised without social media. That didn't exist. And this child, you know, I want to like get rid of everything that looks like a screen. And the world has changed so much dramatically, you know. In many ways, with my first child, I had to be thoughtful about experiences and making sure that there was opportunity for her to, you know, engage in the community. And at the same time, she had neighborhood. She knew that neighborhood. She knew that village. When we moved, she was upset at me because she was trying to get back to that neighborhood. Still as an adult, many days she goes back to the old neighborhood. And the child that my youngest, she doesn't know any of that. Yeah. You know, she doesn't know what it's like to have her best friend live next door.
No.
Or what it's like to, you know, walk to, you know, the store with your friends or walk up and down the street and hang out. That's just not her world. You know, if she's going to see a friend, we need to get in the car
and go. And that's something that's just so interesting to me, how it has changed over time. I had my best friend who lived next door to me at 2 neighborhoods actually, because it's the way the community was, and that didn't change for a very long time in my life. So to see it now, especially with my nieces and nephews who we have to go and get in the car and take them to their friend's house or take them to the play date or wherever we are going. We have to go and get in the car to go up because they don't know anyone in the neighborhood. And so oftentimes I just think about that lack of connection that the young kids are having right now and what's going on and how moms are dealing with that lack of connection. Because it clearly seems like the kids are at home with mom.
They are.
They're just staying at home with mom.
They are. And I think that's the dangerous part about screens, because screens become a babysitter, right? Yeah. Like they become the thing that keeps the young people quiet. Because oftentimes, if you want your young person to have that kind of exposure or to hang out with some friends, it's work on mom. I got to get in the car and I got to drive her to the friend's house. And it's really unfortunate that they've lost so much connection. Yeah, I don't even know that. Oftentimes I describe it and I don't even think my daughter even understands what I'm talking about.
Oh. We're talking about motherhood ahead of Mother's Day on Sunday. Our guest is Amber Redrick. She's the CEO of Detroit's Teen Hype nonprofit. She's also a mother to 4 children. We also want to hear from you in this conversation. What's one thing you wish someone had told you before you became a mom? The number is 313-577-1019, 313-577-1019. So I do want to talk about 4 kids. You have large age gaps within the kids. Let's talk about who's at home right now.
So right now, literally, who is at home is we have Jessie, who is 14 years old, and she is my artsy child, and she is very much a Smurf and has the purest heart. Still believes in all the good of the world, and strikingly different from my bonus son, who I believe 19 years old, and just got back home from his first year at Wayne State. He is the most disciplined baby I have ever met in my life. He spent the first 2 years of our relationship not talking to me. Because he is a mom boy and he did not want to be disloyal to his mother. And in many ways, I had so much respect for that. And I was like, I have never met a child that is so disciplined. And he still is that disciplined. Wow. He boxes and he is physically fit and he is very thoughtful about what he puts in his body. And so he just is that kind of little human. Yeah. My oldest daughter is 33, I think, and that which also makes me a grandmother now to a 5-year-old, which is crazy. And she is tough. She is tough. She is often the person that is the voice of reason, very logical, a very kind of analytical person. frustrated with the world.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned
In many
33,
ways.
so I hear her 100%.
And my bonus daughter is still away at Delaware State. Is she a junior now? She is a junior now at Delaware State. And so she's enjoying that HBCU journey.
And just going back and thinking about growing up with your grandma, and like you said, education wasn't something that you guys talked about actively. You just kind of did it because that's what you were supposed to do. Talk about your kids being in school, being in college, and how you helped foster that for them to be in that space.
So because my journey was so different, I think I was really, really intentional about making sure that they had exposure. I realize now my fiance probably thought I was crazy, but when we blended our family, I came home with a big sticky paper and I put it on the wall and had this long laundry list of all the things that our young people needed to be exposed to before they turned 18. And I was like, these are all the things that need to be done. They need to know how to do this. They got to know how to catch the bus. And oh my God, they have to know how to cook and sew on a button. And he just looked at the list and was like, yeah, they're not going to get all that.
Sewing on a button. Good luck trying to get anyone to sew on a button right now. So, I'm hearing you laugh and talk about all these great things. Talk about some of those joys of having the kids around and raising kids. I mean, I know there's positives that come along with it.
Oh, young people are such a joy, and also, of course, because I love teenagers. Not my own, but I love other people's teenagers. Teenagers in my house are very, very much like giving me all of the energy that they should, and that's difficult. But they are funny. They are resilient. It's like having hope in the house because they don't see the same way that we see the world. They aren't tainted yet. Yeah. Particularly my youngest, like I said, she believes in the beauty of the world. She still thinks everything that people say is true. And so in many ways, it can be delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I do let you go, this is the last response, about 30 seconds or so. What would be the perfect Mother's Day this year?
Oh, now see, I just told you I don't know how to celebrate myself.
That's what we got to know.
So I love to play in the dirt. So probably playing in the garden would be really, really nice. Maybe some time to reflect and to think about, what parenting has been like. This has been fun to, kind of make me really think about this journey of motherhood, and to know that all of my babies are okay. Because, I'm a mother of many, like those are the 4, but then all of the others, I love to look on social media and look in places just to know that all the babies that I had the privilege of being able to touch are well.
Amber Redrick is the CEO, founder of Teen Hype, which is celebrating 21 years in business this year. Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us on the Metro. We would love to have you back.
Thank you. Would love to come back.
Coming up, we'll continue the conversation about the joys and challenges of motherhood ahead of this Mother's Day. Next, we'll speak with a mother of 4. We also want to hear from you. What's one thing you wish someone had told you before you became a mom? The number is 313-577-1019. We'll be right back. This is the Metro. Stay right there.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent. We've been talking about motherhood this hour. That's in part because Mother's Day is Sunday, but it's also because moms often do the most for us. They're frequently the ones to care and nurture us, to keep us in line when it really matters, and to expose us to different people and places and ideas. Last year, the former U.S. Surgeon General said that parental stress is a significant public health issue. But we know that in addition to the challenges, there are a lot of joys that come with motherhood. There are opportunities for creating stronger connections, for providing and maybe sometimes receiving care, and for expanding love. And we want to hear from you about this. what's one thing you wish someone had told you before you became a mom? The number is 313-577-1019. Joining us now in the studio is a mom of 4, Lori Goldman. Lori, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lori, I'm curious, did you always want to be a mom?
No, actually, I remember when I was little, I'm the oldest of 6. So that was the last thing I thought I wanted. But as I got older, and I was a mom later in life, when I hit my mid-30s, suddenly I was afraid that I was going to miss out on something that I may be interested in, that everybody told me I should want, and that my life would be totally bereft if I didn't. And I believed that. So when I was 38, I had my first child, a daughter. And then when I was 48, I had my triplets. So I was an older mom. I am an older mom, but it was totally different from what I wanted, being a caretaker along with my mother when I was young and helping raise those 5 children under me.
Talk about the experience of being an older mom. I mean, you understood yourself better when you had your first child. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. But the thing that I think people don't understand, as an older mom, you also have a lot more baggage. You have a lot more interests. You have a lot more that you've poured into yourself. So it's harder to give, I think. And one of my biggest regrets is that I was not as fully present as I should have or could have been for my children when I was raising them. My youngest are 17. They're graduating from high school this year. And it's so much easier to look back on all the things that I did wrong or that I would change even now, because we're always growing and evolving. I did the best I could, and I try to give myself grace about that. But I really wasn't as present or intent on what I was doing as you think I might be.
So what you're saying is, at first, as a mom at 38, you were maybe a little bit less malleable. But over the years, you became more malleable as you looked at yourself and said, I am a little bit too set in my ways. I have to loosen things up.
Especially for my first child. When you have triplets, all bets are off. You have no life. I was lucky to be able to afford a lot of help. But even then, dealing with 3 distinct personalities that are the same age, you're automatically outnumbered. I don't care if you have 1 husband or 10. You are never going to keep up with all of that.
Lori, what surprised you most about becoming a mom over 2 decades? I mean, as you've mentioned, your daughter, your oldest, is 10 years older than your triplets.
Right. Well, with my first child, I wanted to be the antithesis of what my mother was. My mother was kind of reclusive. She didn't go out into the neighborhood and hang with the other mothers, which made it harder for us kids to have social entree. You know, we made friends, but we weren't as welcomed as other kids whose mothers were involved. With my triplets, so with my first, I was PTA president. I made sure I met tons of people so that my daughter had a social track. With my triplets, it was so overwhelming that I have to say they had a lot of oversight, but sometimes I couldn't remember who was who, what they were called, if they ate that day. It was just so overwhelming that I didn't take all the time and effort to build what I thought would be a social structure for them. But guess what? They did just fine on their own. And in some ways, they're even more resilient than my oldest, who's turned out beautifully and happens to be a PhD psychiatrist in New York, or therapist in New York. But my younger children have made their way without so much input from me, which I thought was very interesting.
So it was about letting go a little bit and
Yes.
trusting them. I do want to have you talk a little bit more about the experience of raising triplets. I mean, I think about, so my sister, her name also starts with an R, Renee, and she's older than me. And my mom always gets us confused. I mean, that's just one example. It's like, Robin, Renee, whatever your name is. So I can not even imagine what it's like to have 3 kids the same age who are having a lot of likeness all at once. Yeah. Talk about that.
From their perspective, they'll individually come to me sometimes, even now at 17, and they'll share a problem that they have. And I have 2 girls and 1 boy. And so it's easy to remember my son's travails, right, when he tells me that something's going wrong. But I get the 2 girls mixed up. If someone's having boy trouble or the other one's having trouble at school with a teacher, I sometimes misremember. Of course, I am much older now as well, so they have the disadvantage of my aged brain cells. But I do the best I can to try to give them all equal access, attention, love. Each one of them knows that they're my favorite. So I do the best that I can.
Lori, there are a lot of people who don't want to become parents now. Young people today are more hesitant to have children. Why do you think that is? I mean, you waited a long time. You were uncertain, but it seems that uncertainty is growing among more broadly among the public.
Well, I don't want to get political, but I think that is, our world is so messed up. Our country is so messed up right now that I can understand the hesitancy. And I know back in the day, we had plenty of problems and people use that as a reason. Why would they bring people into a world that has so much negative going on? But it's never been more true than now. So it's more difficult, I think, raising children today than back even in the Middle Ages, probably. And we know how hard that was.
Ahead of Mother's Day on Sunday.
I was not alive there back then.
Thank you for correcting the record,
you.
Lori. We're speaking with Lori Goldman. She's a mother of 4 who lives in Beverly Hills. Her eldest daughter is 10 years older than her 17-year-old triplets, and we're speaking with her today in honor of Mother's Day. So, Lori, what are the challenges that Kate, your oldest, had to face versus that of your triplets?
Kate had my undivided attention, which is funny.
That's too much, right? That's a problem.
That is. And, I wanted my mother's undivided attention. I wanted my mom to create social spaces for me. So I was going to be that mother. And I was for my oldest daughter. And I think she rebelled against that. She wanted less. So I learned a lesson. And for the triplets, and out of necessity, the numbers, they had a little less of that. And I guess that was the good way to go with them as well.
Now, with Kate versus the triplets, I'm thinking about how society has made these seismic shifts, in particular social media. And that really has changed childhood and parenting as we know it. I'm wondering how social media has affected the life of your kids and your style of parenting.
Let me tell you, I don't want to get too real, but social media, COVID, my kids were, to their detriment, exposed to all of this. It changed their trajectory in school. My daughter, like I said, self-starter, got her PhD, doing great. My triplets struggled a little bit and never recovered from COVID. They're going to graduate. They're going to be fine. But people think that they're going to go on to be CEOs or something, or bank presidents. They have a different life. One may work as a manager. Another one may go to a community college. One is going to go up north to school, maybe to be a nurse. Totally different. Who knows what's going to happen?
We are going to be talking about that later in this hour, how kids in Michigan have really fallen behind because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they have not been able to recover. Before we let you go, in the last 30 seconds, we've talked about some of the challenges. Give us a few of the biggest joys before we go that you have experienced as a mom.
Too many to put in 30 seconds, but to have 4 individuals that love me unconditionally, that's all I have to say.
Lori Goldman is a mother of 4 who lives in Beverly Hills. Her eldest daughter is 10 years older than her 17-year-old triplets. Lori, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and discussing the joys and challenges of motherhood.
Thank you very much.
Coming up here on the Metro, we'll hear about a new production coming to a high school in Detroit. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us.